the realm of affordable housing, getting to know the agencies, getting to understand how some of the subsidies work. And then there's market housing. And in upstate New York, the two haven't, really overlapped a great deal. We haven't had a lot of mixed income housing. The city of New York, for example, has had the 80-20 program with bonding and some other subsidy. So almost routinely, they were developing 80% market with 20% affordable through some programs that those didn't really work here upstate. We seek significant subsidy. Again, as I like to say, through appropriated dollars. So the low-income housing tax credit, that has been appropriated by the federal government, given to New York State on a per capita basis to award competitively. It can't go for sewer or sidewalks or other things that people might think are greater needs than affordable housing. We need those subsidies to make the units affordable. We're asked to start out by, who are we trying to serve? And we have served different folks. We've served, seniors at 30%. Now I've got some units, going up to 90%. Artists and different things that we've done. But once you start with, who are you going to serve? And what's their income? What can you rent? And what are the operating expenses? You really should start with your debt. How much can you afford to borrow? And we borrow as much as we can afford to borrow based on that operational scenario. And then we gap fill. So I think, private developers that have worked in the market that aren't, I think they need some assistance, some support, density bonuses and/or subsidy or other ways, perhaps pilots to get their overall stack down to make the units affordable. You just can't. The cost today of land, the cost of building doesn't necessarily equate without subsidy to an affordable rental unit. But I think, increasingly, people are interested in maybe more mixed income projects like an Energy Square, and certainly interested in perhaps seeing if market projects like the Kingstonian can find a way to create some set aside as well. And I think it's up to all of us to try and communicate, work together to see if we can make those types of things happen.
Another question?
Sorry, Joe, we're not allowing public questioning. It's just the people on the Common Council.
Excuse me?
That's the rule has been that we're not having questioning from people at large. It's just the members of the Common Council. You're free to ask if you want to after the session is over. That'll be fine if Kevin can stay around. Anybody have any other questions?
Yeah, regarding the secret process, you indicated Woodstock Commons, the pause deck added on, it was 5 years or so before you ever got this thing built. And I get the sense when we were talking, I certainly don't want to put words in your mouth, but you worry really a lot about when you have that fork to stay in or go out. Is this a real danger, you think? The secret process can endanger some really good projects because of the time delay and expense with consultants, et cetera, as years on, and yet at the end we go forward.
In my view, it depends almost wholly on the political will and the political or environmental bent of the planning board in charge of the secret process. I think there's no need for a scoping process that took 18 months in Woodstock. That shouldn't have taken more than 30 or 45 days for them to identify 60 days, what they wanted us to study, a traffic study, wetlands study, the bog turtle study, karst geology study. There were several studies and several more than I just named. But so I think the secret process has some guidelines, and they can be extended, and so I think it can go either way. I think it can to take a project and extend things and really try to slow things down and thwart a project that's not really wanted, or perhaps it can go too quick, not take enough time to review. I think people acting in good faith, can navigate a secret process. The pos deck, neg deck, it's a little maybe too black and white to go from 0 to 60, so to speak. There might be a little bit more middle ground, might be a little bit more appropriate. And in particular, if we looked at a few things. So, and it would be great if we could put a little bit harder timelines on it. And there are recommendations for that. But again, we found ourselves in Woodstock, we were dependent on the planning board ultimately voting an approval. So when they said, we're gonna take this time, and again, we didn't wake up one day and say, let's go to Woodstock and, put a ghetto in the middle of town as some accused us of. It was a town board appointed affordable housing committee. They called RUPCO. I was on the job 6 months. Would RUPCO please come to Woodstock? They've been trying to affect affordable housing for the better part of 3 decades and they couldn't get it done. Would we please come and help? And with great naivete, I said yes. So I think,
Glad you did.
well-intentioned process with people on both sides, trying to act in good faith, I think you can get through the process.
Okay.
There's just such a negative connotation when it comes to affordable housing. The stigma that's attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
How, in your opinion or in your view, like, how do we start overcoming that negativity when it comes to it? Because I often hear, I don't want this in my backyard, because of the stigma that's attached to it.
Well, I think the answer to that is complex. I think there's a history in this country of that has made things difficult, and in some ways, affordable housing got a bad name. I think we in the affordable housing game could do a better job of talking about it as well and trying to describe it. I think the evidence is in when you look back after something is built. That's where the evidence is. The first project that I was involved with was in Poughkeepsie, transitional housing for the homeless, and people were, quite upset with the notion that this was going to be something that was being proposed. And it's been in place now for well over 20 years, and it has served a tremendous number of people. I think when we look back at Woodstock Commons, a project that was met with vigorous opposition, 5-year process in front of the planning board. I think when we look back, we just celebrated last year the 5th anniversary. We had a picnic. We honored the concert and said we were going to have 3 days of peace, music, and food, and then we crossed out days and said hours. But we had a good time, and the kids and the people that lived there, and I think the town. I think that when we look back at the Lace Mill, I was at the restaurant around the corner the other night, Lease, and you walk out of Lease, and there, I remember both Lease and the Beverly were both vacant structures back when we started, and I said, these things will turn around, and it's been reported by real estate agencies that as in other places, but certainly in Midtown Kingston, on that side of Broadway, in and around the Lace Mill, housing values have gone up. I think it's been a good project. So when we look back at some of these, I think, we build quality, affordable housing, well-designed and thought out, I think that can be a help to overcome Mostly though, I think, for a long time, affordable has really been more of a struggle for folks at the very low end of the income band. And oftentimes when people are struggling at that level, they don't have as much time to come out and organize and raise their voice for affordable housing. As it has crept up into the middle income range and more people at middle income levels are affected, you're seeing a larger, louder collective voice. You know, just this past year, we've had folks that are in 5 complexes that were bought by one developer from the city, and they have organized themselves and talked about some of the issues that they're facing in affordable and or stable housing. And so I think that's helpful to have more people raise their voice around the issue. And it's, you know, it's housing, it's home, and it's home for me, it's home for you, and who wouldn't like it to be affordable?
Well, the Lace Mill is a beautiful building. Beautiful. Love going over there for the community events.
Thank you. There'll be a new, first Saturday's this Saturday, there'll be another new art show.
Any other questions?
No.
Well,
I'd just make a comment, and I think, going back to your question about the concept and the negativity, I think part of the negativity is people thinking long-term about what's this, it's gonna look nice now, but what's it gonna look like in 5 years? And this is the perfect example to use. And just a short story, there was a gentleman who would approach me as Lace Mills was getting ready to open, and this is gonna be a tragedy to the neighborhood, and it's gonna be awful, and he's a landlord, it's gonna put me out of business. I said, no, wait and see. I guarantee this is gonna be a show place. So sure enough, about 2 weeks ago, I saw him, and I didn't bring the subject up, and we're just kind of talking, and he said, yeah, and something like the Lace Mills, you know, like he was telling me how good this was gonna be. You know, he's raving about it now. And this was a guy he was up in arms, and he was telling everybody he knew, we gotta block this, and you know, this is not gonna be good for the neighborhood. So I think as people see this, you know, we can strike, you know, an agreement between affordable housing and something that's good for the neighborhood, the city, the community as a whole. You know, but it just takes people who actually want to do it.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say is this: there's no question that I think Hillary Harvey asked me this question on the radio. Was there a perceived difference on our part in the approval process for Energy Square, or Lace Mill, and Landmark Place? And the answer is yes. And so housing is a continuum, and there's a hierarchy, and you know, home ownership, artist housing, you know, people do pretty good for the most part. Energy Square was mixed income. Landmark Place has proposed 66 units, 31 of which are affordable housing for seniors, period. 35 of which are affordable housing for seniors with supportive services. And serving, you know, seniors with some special needs. And that becomes who are, at the time of moving in, are either homeless or at risk of being homeless, but screened for their ability to live independently. And so when you start to move on that scale of the continuum and start to talk about homeless or supportive, it becomes more difficult for people to accept this change, for people to accept this coming into their neighborhood. You know, we look at it and think and see that, you know, these people are living here in I hate to use the term these people, but people with special needs are living in our community today without housing services. At the last meeting I attended, which was the landlord meeting, you know, Kathy Maloney spoke about seeing and dealing with mental illness at the Public Housing Authority in her units, and without any services whatsoever. So, when it depends on the type of housing that you're proposing in the realm of affordable, and that can engender a different response, and we try to understand that. But I think, again, well-designed, and not in just the architecture, but in the level of services that can be provided. And I just think it's so much better for a community to provide affordable and supportive housing for persons who are in our community who are age 55 and older, who may have a special need, on a campus with some real services, than it is to just, forget about them and let them be in a boarding home over there, or, that's what we see, Unfortunately, when Kingston Hospital did their study to look at who was using the hospital or overusing the hospital, the results were, they had two populations, those with respiratory illness and those with behavioral health problems. And it was, mostly seniors, people living in hotels, boarding homes, shelter. One gentleman had visited the emergency room 65 times in 1 year, more than once a week. Lonely, without any service, but they're here. They weren't visiting, Westchester Medical Center in White Plains. They were visiting the Kingston Hospital because they live here currently without services. So we think it can be better. I understand it can be a little bit more difficult, but again, we're a not-for-profit corporation led by a board of directors. We've been here 38 years. We intend to be here a long time, and we're responsible and accountable to this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank
We
you,
appreciate
Kevin.
it. All right, Don, you want to help us? No? You're all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, one of the crucial things, and it's too bad we couldn't have our other participant, because there are different pressures on for-profit developers. And so I'm going to try to speak with him at some other time and get a communication so that we can get a conversation going, because we need to understand what those folks do too, and certainly with the push-pull, because I think what's important is we don't have to wait necessarily for developers to come here. If we are creating a good housing policy, thinking about the different populations at need, what's the kind of diversity, what's the kind of mix we want in our various neighborhoods, we could actually start to think about projects, look for developers, and try to bring them in to do the things that we think need to be done. So our next housing meeting then is going to be 2 days from now. It's going to be at the Clinton Avenue Methodist Church. It's going to be on homelessness and housing insecurity. We've got a number of folks who are going to be telling us about their experiences with these two phenomena, and we'll have 1 or 2 folks there who will talk about it more from the policy angle, and I believe we'll also have a short film about homelessness in general. So I hope all of you can make it to that, and if you can't, it'll be on the TV. All right, thanks for coming. We appreciate it.
Ask any questions?
Yeah, you can ask any questions. But we're done.
Before anyone leaves the room?
No, you can talk to him now.
Excuse me, I have a